the bookstore Orion Books. It was full that night. Warm lights illuminated the wooden shelves, and the smell of coffee mingled with the aroma of newly arrived books. It was a special event, the launch of Roots of Tomorrow, the book that was already on the bestseller list even before its official release. Louisa Martins, the author, entered discreetly from the side of the room. She liked to observe the audience before performing. Black, 38 years old, braided hair and a serene smile, Louisa always dreamed of that moment, seeing people eager to read her work, discuss her ideas, and recognize her talent. However, something was wrong. She realized that no one was looking at her. Instead, the focus was on a white man in a suit, Samuel Becker, the editor-in-chief of Orion Books. He smiled and waved to the audience as if he were the center of the event. Louisa took a deep breath. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. She walked over to the main counter where a stack of her books were laid out. Some customers picked up copies and commented on the story, but no one seemed to associate it with the author. Then, an elegant blonde woman approached. "Excuse me," she said without even looking at Louisa. "Do you work here? Can you tell me where the line is for the autograph?" Louisa blinked, surprised. "I am the author." The woman opened her eyes wide, analyzing her for a moment. "Oh, I thought..." "Well, the editor was talking about the book, so I assumed it was his." Louisa forced a polite smile. "No, Roots of Tomorrow is my book." The woman smiled awkwardly and hurried away. Louisa looked at Samuel Becker, who continued entertaining the guests. It was as if she didn't even exist. She swallowed hard, feeling her frustration growing, but I wouldn't let that go unnoticed. Louisa felt a knot in her stomach as she watched Samuel Becker receive the compliments that were meant for her. He smiled, talked animatedly, and even signed some copies of Roots of Tomorrow, as if he were the author. She took a deep breath, trying not to lose her composure. That was his moment, his work, his story. Walking to the table where she was supposed to be sitting, she found a bookstore employee, Clara, organizing the books. "Excuse me," said Louisa, forcing a smile. "Where's the autograph pen?" Clara looked at her for a moment, confused. "Oh, do you want an autograph? The line is on the other side." Louisa kept her smile, but now with a touch of irony. "No, I'm the author." The employee's face immediately turned red. "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I thought that..." Louisa didn't let her finish. "All good. Can you help me organize the queue? I don't think anyone realized that I'm the one who should be here." Before Clara could respond, Samuel Becker appeared alongside them. "Louisa," he said in his always enthusiastic tone, "you have arrived. I was just talking about the book. People loved it." She crossed her arms. "Yes, I noticed. So much so that they are asking you to sign my book." Samuel laughed, as if it were an unimportant joke. "Ah, just some unsuspecting readers. You know how it is, right? People associate the publisher with the book." "No, Samuel," Louisa cut in. "They associate the book with you because you didn't make a point of introducing me." He blinked, feigning surprise. "Don't be so harsh, Louisa. It's your moment, too." "Also," the word echoed in her mind. Samuel was treating it as if it were his project. Louisa looked around. The audience seemed interested in the book, but few knew who she was. That needed to change, and quickly. "Samuel, I think it's time for me to talk about my book myself," she said, taking a microphone. He hesitated. "Well, we are already advanced in programming, so I better run." And without waiting for a response, Louisa turned to the audience, tapping the microphone to attract attention. Samuel turned pale. The sound of the microphone echoed through the bookstore, silencing the conversations. All eyes turned to Louisa, who now stood firmly next to the autograph table. She looked around, taking in the curious faces of the audience. It was now or never. "Good evening, everyone." His voice was strong, confident. "I want to thank everyone for being here at the launch of Roots of Tomorrow. This book is the result of years of dedication, research, and above all, a story I needed to tell." A buzz ran through the room. Some people exchanged confused looks. Many didn't know. She was the author. She continued, "I realized that when I arrived here, a lot of people didn't know who I am. Some people even asked me where the autograph line was, as if I were part of the bookstore staff. The restlessness increased. Some shifted uncomfortably." Samuel Becker forced a tight smile in the background, trying to contain the situation. "But I don't blame them," Louisa continued with a firm tone. "Because when an event like this is handled wrongly, people end up associating a book with the face. Wrong." Now the silence was absolute. Louisa walked to the table and picked up a copy of her own book, Roots of Tomorrow. It's not just a title. It's about visibility, belonging, and recognition. It's about what happens when a Black woman occupies a space that many think doesn't belong to her. Those words had a direct impact on the audience. Some began to applaud, timidly at first, then more loudly. Samuel Becker cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Well, Louisa, I think everyone already understands." "I'm not finished yet, Samuel." She cut him off, now smiling. The audience laughed. Louisa picked up a pen and sat at the autograph table. "If you want to know more about Roots of Tomorrow, feel free to pick up a book and meet me in person." This time, the queue formed immediately. The queue grew quickly. Now, people wanted to meet her, hear her story, and understand what led her to write Roots of Tomorrow. Louisa took the first copy and signed calmly, looking into the eyes of the woman who handed her the book. "You write with so much emotion," said the reader. "I can't believe I didn't know you were the author." Louisa smiled. "Now you know, and I hope that when you read, you see my voice in every word. Samuel Becker, who previously dominated the event, now I didn't know where to fit in." He tried to smile and interact with the guests, but no one paid attention to him anymore. The center of attention. Finally, it was Louisa. In the middle of the crowd, a young girl named Camila. I anxiously waited for my turn in line. When he finally arrived, he held the book with shaking hands. "You have no idea what this moment means to me," Camila said, emotional. "I always wanted to be a writer, but I never saw someone like me in this field. Today, seeing you here, I realize that I can get there too." Louisa held her hand for a moment and smiled. "You can, and it goes, never let anyone make you believe otherwise." Camila nodded with tears in her eyes. While signing more books, Louisa reflected on the power of representation. She had spent her entire life fighting to be seen and heard, and now she was paving the way for other Black women who dreamed of the same space. When he looked at the table where Samuel was, he saw that he had left quietly, without goodbyes or speeches. That was his victory, and she didn't need anyone else to validate her. The autograph line seemed endless, but Louisa didn't feel tired. For the first time, she was recognized as she should. The night was already late when one of the bookstore organizers approached the microphone. "We would like to thank everyone for attending this special event. And, of course, a special thanks to the incredible Louisa Martins, author of Roots of Tomorrow." This time, the applause was deafening. Louisa stood up and looked at the audience. It was confirmation that she would never again let her own story be told by someone else. At the back of the room, he saw Samuel Becker watching the scene, arms crossed. He realized that he had lost control of the narrative and that he no longer had room to minimize her presence. Deciding to end it once and for all, Louisa took the microphone. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here, but more than that, I want to remember that stories like mine should be no exception. The audience was silent, absorbing his words. For years, Black authors were erased, ignored, or treated as supporting actors in their own creations. But that ends today. We are here, and our stories matter. One unison applause echoed throughout the hall. Samuel Becker forced a smile and took a step forward. Louisa, this was certainly a great event for everyone. And of course, Orion Books has always believed in its potential. She turned to him, holding the microphone. Was it really, Samuel? Because, until a few hours ago, no one knew that I was the author of this book. The audience reacted with murmurs, and Samuel Becker, for the first time, he was speechless. Louisa smiled. She no longer needed his approval. Samuel Becker opened his mouth to respond, but quickly closed it. He knew there was no way around this situation. The truth was out in the open, and the audience now looked at him with different eyes. Louisa didn't wait for another word from him. That night wasn't about Samuel, it was about her. She turned to the audience and held up a copy of Roots of Tomorrow. This book is not just a story I wrote, it is proof that our voices can no longer be silenced. More applause filled the bookstore. People came up to hug her, took photos, and shared their own experiences. Louisa realized that his fight went beyond that event. She was not just a writer, but an inspiration to many people who had been through similar situations. In the middle of the public, Camilla, the young aspiring writer, waited for the crowd to thin out before approaching again. Louisa, I know. You've heard this many times today, but thank you. Louisa smiled. Have you started writing your book yet? Camilla blushed. Not yet, but now I know I will. Louisa took a bookmark and wrote a message before handing it to the girl. So promise you'll send me the draft when you're done. Camilla's eyes lit up. I promise. As the event ended, Louisa picked up her phone and saw dozens of messages from people commenting on her speech that night. The repercussions were just beginning, and for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Weeks after the event, Louisa Martins was in all the literary headlines. The video of his speech went viral on social media, being shared by authors, readers, and activists. Roots of Tomorrow. It became a symbol of resistance and representation in the publishing world. But the impact went beyond the internet. Book sales soared, exceeding all the publishers' expectations. Invitations for interviews, lectures, and new contracts began to appear. This time, no one ignored the name of Louisa Martins. About that, Samuel Becker suffered the consequences. Orion Books has come under pressure from literary groups and readers to review its internal policies. The editor's behavior did not go unnoticed, and months later he was removed from the company. One morning, sitting in her apartment surrounded by manuscripts and invitations from major publishers, Louisa received an unexpected email. Sender, Camila Silva. Subject, my first draft. She smiled as she opened the annex. Camilla had kept her promise. In the last line of the email, a sentence made Louisa feel a lump in her throat. If today I believe that I can be a writer, it's because you showed that it's possible. Louisa closed the laptop and took a deep breath. She wasn't just writing stories. She was changing stories. And that was just the beginning.